Gabon for his statement, and I now give the floor to the representation.
Thank you, President. We welcome Mr. Argus and Mr. Brammertz. We must say, though, that over the last 6 months, the mechanism, whose name includes the word residual, has not made any progress in the planned conclusion of its work. In the Security Council resolution establishing the mechanism, it states that its functions and size will diminish over time. Nevertheless, not in the staff or in the budget have we seen any real reductions. The alleged progress, which so earnestly trumpeted from report to report, should be looked at over a broader time period. Then it would be clear that, for example, in terms of the number of staff employed by the mechanism, it's still at the same level as 2017. In other words, over the last 5 years, no real downsizing has happened. All there is has been running on the spot and bureaucratic smoke and mirrors. I would underscore the mechanism only has 3 cases before it, and by July there'll only be 2 left. 1 on the first instance and 1 at appeal. There aren't any new cases in the pipeline, as long as, of course, the mechanism resists the temptation of using the cases of contempt of court as an instrument to prolong its own existence, that is. Why, in these conditions, they are retaining so many staff, it's not quite clear to us. Now there's another biannual report of the work of the residual mechanism, and the outcomes of this will determine the parameters for its further functioning. We trust that this process will help the leadership of the mechanism to undertake the necessary efforts to swiftly draw down its work. The effectiveness of using existing resources was never the strong suit of the international criminal tribunals for Rwanda or for former Yugoslavia. It is regrettable that the mechanism has completely inherited this characteristic. From the most recent report, you can see that over its entire existence, it has been chasing ghosts. It's turned out that one of the so-called major fugitives, Mr. Piranha, has been dead for 15 years, and another, Mr. Munoyaragama, has been dead for 20. And it has only come to light now. And this can hardly serve as proof of excellent efficiency. We regret that the ICTR and the mechanism have not managed to bring those main suspects to justice. Our delegation has been following very carefully the compliance with the rights of those under supervision of the mechanism. We are very concerned about the information that we've in the report about the death of one of the acquitted who was in Arusha. We noted the lack of detail about the circumstances surrounding his death. It's been a year since the dismissal of the appeal of Mr. Mladic, who still is under supervision of the mechanism. We were very concerned to follow the news about his worsening health. We will call for the mechanism to step up their efforts to monitor the medical state of persons in its care and ensure that they can receive timely and qualified medical assistance in line with Security Council Resolution 2529 from 2020. President, looking at the beginning of our meeting, but I'm sure that some delegations today will hold forth about the so-called legacy of the mechanism and the tribunals. A lot has been said about this, and by the leaders of these bodies too. At the same time, there is a growing practice of denying the outcomes of the work of these bodies, including the glorification of some people sentenced by them. Let's try and grasp what legacy will the tribunals and mechanisms leave behind, and will it really be able to really support the process of international and interconfessional reconciliation in the Balkans? Though, despite the hopes placed upon it, the mechanism, from its very inception, continued in the footsteps of the one-sided and politically biased ICTY. the anti-Serbian bias in the investigations, and the conviction that it was indeed the Serbian people who were completely responsible for the events of the 1990s hasn't gone anywhere. It's not even a question about the number of convictions of the ICTY and the mechanism from each of the ethnic groups. That would be a gross oversimplification. The main question is who was convicted and why, or not convicted, and what happened with the leaders of each of the parties. In this connection, the publishing of the 7th of January of 2011, the report of the PACE about the atrocities committed by the Kosovo Liberation Army in Kosovo between 1998 to 2000, including crimes against humanity, war crimes, the systematic abduction and murder of people, and also an industrializing the trade in human organs. It is surprising that the ICTY and its successor, the residual mechanism, had no questions to ask about those mentioned in the report. The witnesses during interviews spoke about organ harvesting and other barbaric acts committed by the leaders of the Kosovo Albanians. However, the ICTY did not see fit to bring any of them to justice. They didn't even start to investigate it. This is everything you need to know, really, about the impartiality and the objectivity of the ICTU and the mechanism and the international criminal justice system as a whole. This protection on the part of the ICTY led to a situation where the leaders of the illegitimate territory, unlawfully arrested from Serbia, once and for all convinced of their own infallibility. And former bandits and criminals, in the blink of an eye, were transformed into respectable politicians who were lauded as national heroes. They gave out interviews, they shook hands with European leaders, and even very recently enjoyed freedom and impunity. I'd like to ask our Western colleagues, who love so much to hold forth on a victim-centred approach, what about the families of those sold into slavery or indeed for their organs? What's it like for them to see these European trips and political tours of Mr. Hashim Atachi, Ramosha Haradina, and their sidekicks? And where is all of this? Where in all of this is the fight against impunity? The initiative to approve the Kosovo Specialist Chambers to investigate atrocities committed by Albanians is not an answer to the question as to why the ICTY for so many years was blind to such flagrant crimes during all the years of its existence. It is the ICTY that should have been bringing to justice those guilty for committing the most serious of crimes. Its policy of being selective hearing is an indelible stain of disgrace on the legacy of the ICTY and of the residual mechanism forever. Now, in terms of Kosovo Specialist Chambers, then this initiative is, to put it lightly, about 20 years too late. And even now, it doesn't seem to be rushing to hand down judgments either. Indeed, its mandate was deliberately constructed with a large number of loopholes, which are deftly then exploited by lawyers. For example, they're calling for the dropping of charges, and I quote, for crimes committed that took place before the middle of 1998 or after the 10th of June 1999, or committed on the territory of Albania. And what is this? Why do you need to drop the charges for crimes committed on the territory of Albania? Who's interested to cover Albania's tracks in terms of what happened during the period of the Balkan War, of the industrial scale kidnap of Serbs, harvesting of their organs, and then selling them to the well-heeled in Europe and beyond? That is all, President.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for his statement. And now